June 1944. The Allied powers launched the largest amphibious invasion in human history. Allied aircraft filled the skies above northern France. Along the coast of Normandy, tens of thousands of soldiers come ashore on the beaches of German-occupied Europe. For Adolf Hitler, the war has entered a critical phase. In the east, German armies are retreating under pressure from the Soviet Union. In the Mediterranean, Allied forces are advancing north through Italy. And now, a major Allied army has landed in France. Over the following days, the Allied foothold in Normandy continues to expand. Landing craft cross the English Channel around the clock, carrying reinforcements, armor, artillery, and supplies. By the end of the first week of the invasion, June 11, 1944, more than 326,000 Allied troops have landed in Normandy. German commanders now face the task of containing a rapidly expanding Allied bridgehead before the invading armies can push deeper into France. To reinforce the defenses around Caen, several German armored divisions are committed to the battle. Among them is one of the newest formations in the Waffen-SS, the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend. The division had been formed in 1943, at a time when Germany's military situation was already deteriorating. Years of brutal fighting had taken a heavy toll on the German armed forces. The Eastern Front in particular had consumed enormous numbers of experienced soldiers. By 1943, the German military faced an increasing shortage of trained manpower. To help replace these losses, the Nazi regime turned to a generation that had grown up entirely under its rule. Young men who had spent their adolescence in the Hitler Youth movement. The enlisted ranks of the new division were drawn largely from boys born in 1926. Many were only 17 or 18 years old when they began their military training. They had grown up in a Germany already at war. For years, they had participated in Hitler Youth activities that emphasized physical endurance, discipline, and loyalty to the Führer. Military drills and weapons training were increasingly incorporated into their upbringing. To lead these young soldiers, the Waffen-SS assigned experienced officers and non-commissioned officers from veteran SS formations that had already fought on the Eastern Front. Men who had survived years of brutal combat against the Soviet Union. The result was a formation that combined youthful ideological commitment with experienced battlefield leadership. By the spring of 1944, the division numbered nearly 20,000 men and possessed a full complement of tanks, artillery, and mechanized infantry. Within weeks, many of those young soldiers would be fighting in the hedgerows and villages of Normandy. The 12th SS was stationed in the region of Lisieux and Évreux, southeast of the Allied landings. When news of the invasion arrived on the 6th of June, the division immediately began moving north toward the fighting. But reaching the battlefield was not simple. Allied aircraft dominated the skies over northern France. Fighter bombers roamed the countryside searching for German movements. Any column spotted on the roads risked being attacked from the air. German vehicles were forced to move cautiously, often traveling at night and hiding under trees or camouflaged nets during the day. Even with these precautions, many vehicles were destroyed along narrow roads. Despite these difficulties, the division continued its movement toward the front. By June 7th, forward elements of the division were approaching the area west of Caen. There they encountered advancing Canadian forces who had landed on Juno Beach. Some of the first major clashes occurred around the villages of Authy and Buron. In these early battles, young soldiers of the Hitlerjugend division fought their first engagements against experienced Canadian infantry and armored units. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. Further west, other elements of the division engaged Canadian forces advancing inland toward the important road network north of Caen. Battles erupted around villages such as Putot-en-Bessin and Bretteville-et-Augeaise. These engagements formed part of a broader struggle for the control of the approaches of Caen. German commanders understood that if Allied forces captured the city and broke through the surrounding defenses, their armored formations could advance rapidly into the open countryside beyond. Over the next several days, the Hitlerjugend division fought a series of brutal defensive engagements against Canadian and British units pushing south from the beaches. To prevent a breakthrough, German commanders shifted from counterattacks to defensive positions, digging in across the villages and open ground west of Caen. Elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division were repositioned across a line of villages and crossroads west of the city. As units were forced back from earlier engagements, they took up positions where the ground allowed them to hold. Villages, road junctions, and field boundaries became anchor points. One of those points was Mesnil Patry. The village lay northwest of Caen, along one of the routes leading toward Choeuf and the higher ground beyond. If Canadian forces broke through here, they could begin to turn the western flank of the German defenses. That made the position difficult to ignore. Units of SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 26 were moved into the village and the surrounding fields. They arrived under pressure, not to prepare a fortified line over time, but to hold ground that could not be given up. Positions were taken quickly. Panzer Grenadiers moved into houses, barns, and hedgerows. Shallow fighting positions were dug along field boundaries. Weapons were brought forward and placed where they could be used immediately. Machine gun teams equipped with MG-42s were positioned along the northern edge of the village and its surrounding fields. Their arcs of fire were aligned to cover the open approaches leading from Normandy-en-Bessin toward Mesnil-Patry. From these positions, the fields could be brought under sustained fire, particularly along likely infantry avenues of advance. The terrain offered little natural cover. Any movement across the wheat fields would be exposed for several hundred meters. PaK 40-75mm anti-tank guns were emplaced along roads, field boundaries, and likely armored approaches. Where possible, the guns were sited behind hedgerows or partially concealed within farm enclosures. Their positions were selected to allow engagement of enemy armor at range, while remaining difficult to detect from the front. These guns formed the primary anti-tank screen covering the village. Infantry units were equipped with Panzerfausts, distributed among forward elements within the village and along its immediate perimeter. These weapons were intended for use at short range, particularly if enemy tanks penetrated the anti-tank gun line and entered built-up areas. Engagement distances in such conditions would be measured in just mere meters apart from soldiers. To the rear and along the flanks of the forward positions, elements of SS Panzer Regiment 12 positioned their armored vehicles in concealed locations. Panzer IVs and Panthers were deployed behind hedgerows, within orchards, and along tree lines where they could observe the open ground north of the village, while remaining difficult to detect. These positions allowed German tanks to engage advancing armor at range, particularly as the Canadian units moved across exposed fields. Engines were kept off where possible, reducing the chance of detection from the air and masking their positions. The role of these armored units was to reinforce the defensive line at critical moments, to engage advancing tanks once they were exposed, and to prevent any breakthrough toward the roads leading south of Mesnil-Patry. The defensive arrangement was based on layered engagement. Advancing forces would first come under mortar and machine gun fire in the open fields. If they continued forward, they would enter the engagement range of anti-tank guns. Should they reach the village itself, they would encounter close-range resistance from infantry equipped with anti-tank weapons. By June 11, 1944, the German defensive line west of Caen had been established. At Mesnil Patry, elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division, including SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 26, occupied prepared positions within the village and its surrounding approaches. Some of these soldiers had already been engaged in combat in the days following the Allied landings. Others were facing their first major engagement. Across the fields to the north, Canadian forces were assembling for an attack. The Germans prepared and waiting unknown to the Canadians approaching. On June 11th, 1944, tanks of the 1st Hussars moved out first, advancing south from the area of Normandy. Behind them, infantry of the Queen's Own Rifles followed through the wheat fields. The ground between them and the village was open. Flat fields, broken only by hedgerows and narrow tracks. There was little to screen their movement. German observers had already reported the advance. The columns could be seen forming and moving south. There was no need to adjust the line. The defenses were already in place. As the Canadian force moved into range, the German positions opened fire. Machine gun fire erupted, cutting into the infantry of the Queen's Own Rifles, riding on the Shermans of the 1st Hussars as they advanced across the open wheat fields. The men dismounted under fire, attempting to find cover where none existed. Within moments, concealed 75mm PaK-40 anti-tank guns opened fire on the Canadian armor. The leading Shermans were hit almost immediately. Further rounds followed, striking the column in quick succession. Several tanks were set ablaze. Crews attempted to escape, many of them coming under sustained machine gun fire. German infantry of SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment 26, positioned along the hedgerows and field boundaries, maintained fire across the open ground. German assault engineers from the 12th SS Pioneer Battalion, concealed in the fields, then moved in. They'd been ordered to allow the tanks to pass and engage the infantry following behind. Using Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons and magnetic charges, they attacked at close range. Some tanks were struck from only a few meters away. German armored units of SS Panzer Regiment 12 then engaged from concealed positions behind the forward line. Panzer IVs and Panthers opened fire at range, targeting the advancing column. In the confusion, communication between Canadian units began to break down. At least one tank commander, unable to reach other vehicles by radio, exited his tank under fire in an attempt to relay orders directly. The Canadians had advanced into a prepared defensive position. One Canadian soldier later recalled that they were caught in the open. Tanks were burning, and we didn't know where the fire was coming from. Within a short period of time, the attack began to break down. Tanks were knocked out across the fields. Infantry units became separated from their armored support. Some vehicles attempted to continue the advance. Others began to turn back. There was little coordination remaining. Despite these losses, a number of Canadian tanks and infantry succeeded in entering Mesnil Patry. At approximately 3:15 in the afternoon, the village was reported as secured. This proved premature. Within minutes, German Jagdpanzer tank destroyers of SS Panzerjägerabteilung 12 opened fire from concealed positions to the west. They engaged the Canadian armor at close range, knocking out several tanks in quick succession. Reports also indicated that additional German armor was approaching. The Canadian position quickly became untenable. By late afternoon, the remaining Canadian units began to withdraw. The retreat was carried out in small groups under continued fire. Numerous tanks were left behind. Many of the wounded remained in the fields. Some crawled through the wheat, others never left it. By the end of the engagement, the 1st Hussars had lost 34 Sherman tanks and 3 Fireflies. Casualties among the regiment reached approximately 80 men killed, wounded, or missing. The Queen's Own Rifles suffered even more severely. Of the 105 men who went into action, 96 became casualties. German losses were also significant, though lower in comparison. Around 189 men were reported killed, wounded, or missing across the engaged units. Tank losses were limited, with several sources indicating around a dozen German vehicles destroyed, though German records confirm fewer. For some of those left on the battlefield, the fighting did not end with the withdrawal. In the aftermath, Canadian troops returning to recover their dead made disturbing discoveries. Several soldiers were found with gunshot wounds to the head. One witness later stated that German troops had moved through the battlefield after the fighting, shooting wounded men where they lay. Other accounts emerged in the days that followed. Canadian prisoners taken during the battle were interrogated by elements of the division. Some were later executed. Survivors reported seeing prisoners shot after surrendering. These incidents formed part of a broader pattern. During the Normandy campaign, elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division were implicated in multiple executions of Canadian prisoners. The most well-known of these occurred at Ardennes Abbey, where captured soldiers were taken behind the lines and shot. Many of the individuals involved were young soldiers raised within the Hitler Youth system. They had been taught that duty to the Third Reich and loyalty to the Führer were absolute. This contributed to both their effectiveness in combat and their involvement in actions that violated the rules of war. The division continued to fight in the weeks that followed, holding defensive positions in the Caen sector. In late July 1944, Allied forces launched Operation Cobra, breaking through German lines in western Normandy. This forced a general German withdrawal across the front. By August, large numbers of German troops were trapped in what became known as the Falaise Pocket. The 12th SS was among those caught in the encirclement. The division had entered Normandy with more than 20,000 men. By the end of August, it had lost around 8,000 of them, along with most of its tanks and vehicles. The fighting in Normandy had been prolonged and costly, with both German and Allied forces engaged in sustained close-range combat across fields, villages, and hedgerows. During the final days, German units forced open a narrow escape route. Some elements of the division managed to withdraw east. Many others were killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. Those who escaped crossed the Seine and were reorganized in Germany and Belgium, where the division was rebuilt with replacements. By December 1944, it had returned to combat during the Ardennes offensive in Belgium. Despite their defensive positions and repeated counterattacks, German forces in Normandy were unable to achieve their objective of driving the Allies back into the sea. The division's soldiers fought fiercely for every stretch of ground, inflicting significant losses on Allied forces and delaying their advance through sustained and determined resistance. By the end of the campaign, the elite SS Panzer Division that had been committed to stop the invasion had been effectively destroyed. Raised for the battlefield, they were reduced to fragments in Normandy,